So many have been trumpeting the return of the two Michaels here to Canada as a successful ending. But you were quoted as saying that you think that this is an overall loss for Canada and the U.S. How so?
So I think the reason why this is a loss is because I think China's use of the hostage diplomacy worked. I think it put pressure on the United States and Canada and the U.S. Department of Justice to make a deal they wouldn't have otherwise made. And so this is a loss because the normal operation of our domestic legal systems in the United States and Canada were altered by China's frankly dirty tactic.
Now, as a part of that deal with the U.S., Meng had to admit to wrongdoing, that the U.S.'s case against her was factual, and that was something that she had previously denied. So does that not give the states ammunition to use in the future?
It does. It's helpful, but it's not decisive. The U.S. has a big case against Huawei, alleging a variety of things. This would be helpful, but I think of minimal significance. I think in these types of deferred prosecution agreements, usually there's some sort of agreement to cooperate in the broader investigation. That's why you get the deferred prosecution, or you pay some sort of compensation to those you harmed through your actions, that you committed fraud. And here, what's odd is that she admitted that the facts are accurate, but she faces no consequences for it. So it doesn't feel like it's a normal deferred prosecution agreement. It just feels like they made the best possible deal they could, and I think justifiably, given the humanitarian circumstances that you have these two Canadians stuck, forever. And so I think it was the right deal to make on moral humanitarian reasons, but I don't think it's a good precedent for the future.
Well, and so given what happened in this case of hostage diplomacy, many say that China and Canada relations are currently the worst they've been in decades. So what do you think happens the next time the U.S. wants help from an ally over an extradition request involving China?
Look, I think this worked for China. China's not even trying to pretend like it didn't conduct hostage diplomacy. The government of China is actually taking credit for getting Meng Wanzhou free, even though in theory this is just a private agreement between her and the U.S. Department of Justice. But they're actually taking credit for this, which suggests that they think they actually are not embarrassed that they use hostage diplomacy to get their way here. And so that suggests they're going to use this again. And that also means that I think next time Canada or any other U.S. ally receives a request from the United States on a high-level Chinese or sensitive Chinese case, they're all going to think twice. Canada is the closest ally of the United States on these sorts of things, and if Canada's put under this pressure, imagine what another country would be if it was not even that closely tied to the United States. So I just think this overall is a really sad outcome. I mean, it's a good outcome for the Michaels, but it's sad for U.S. and Canada and their relations with China, which I think are going to get worse.
Well, and when we watch how this storyline is playing out in China, for example, they have denied that the Meng case was connected to the case of the two Michaels throughout. And even now, we're hearing reports from Chinese media that the reason why they were let free was because of illness. So what do you make of how that storyline is playing out in China?
So it's really, the Chinese have a real advantage. They can control the media narrative in a way that Canadians and Americans can't, the governments can't. And look, it's just they're not even mentioning the Michaels, but they're taking credit somehow for getting her released. So I think that the story about the medical release and giving them bail, it doesn't fit with typical Chinese law. There's no explanation for how this is consistent with the Chinese claim that the two Michaels were severe threats to national security that justified holding them essentially without lawyers, without any sort of open charges for years. And all of a sudden, they can be released on bail, which is after the trial, which is the opposite of the way it's supposed to be, for medical reasons, but not explaining that if they had any medical, conditions. It's a farce. I mean, it just has a sign. They're trying to sort of cover the ground a little bit, but in general, they're not embarrassed by it. The Chinese state media is taking credit for this and declaring this a victory, which it sort of is for China. I mean, China bullied its way to get the result that it wanted, and that's not good. That's not good for us in the long run.
And to be clear on that illness point, I mean, of course, we all saw them arrive in Canada yesterday. They certainly looked fine. And even Marc Garneau, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, was saying today that they certainly were in good shape as far as he could tell as well.
Can I also say that there are a lot of people in Chinese prisons who are very sick, and the Chinese government will not happen to release on the day that Meng Wanzhou was released. It's a farce. It's a ridiculous claim by the government.
I'm also curious how this story is playing out in the United States, because, of course, here in Canada, as I mentioned off the top, it's being hailed as a monumentous occasion. In China, they literally rolled out a red carpet with flags waving like it was a national holiday. But what about there in the States? How is this all being framed to the public there?
So I think this in the States, obviously, the U.S. wants to help Canada when it can, but it doesn't have the same sort of urgency because they're not U.S. citizens. I think what this is maybe is potentially a small turning point in U.S.-China relations. I don't think it is, but there's some people who are saying it might be, that the U.S. compromise to help out Canada and give China something it wanted. And maybe China will reciprocate by giving the U.S. something it wants, and it'll slowly help rekindle better relations. I think there's some speculation that this is the case. I don't think myself think that's likely, but I think it's something some people are hoping for.
Okay, well, it will be very interesting to continue to watch for all three nations, frankly. Julian, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Okay, thank you.
And Julian Ku is a constitutional and international law professor at Hofstra University in Long Island, New York.